my name is Timothy Persons, and I've been teaching on a master's level since 1982 in Finland at Aalto University. Um, I'm an adjunct professor in the visual arts department, and I've been working primarily as the director of the Helsinki School in the beginning, which eventually became the director of the Helsinki School. Now, then we have to explain a little bit what that is. The Helsinki School was an educational experiment back in the 90s, where we just came out of a major recession in Finland. Actually, we're still in it, and consequently, there was like a whole generation of art students who didn't really have a future. And at that point, I was asked to come in and sort of reevaluate some of the departments by Yrjö Saatama. And what ended up happening was I started with the photography department, just by chance, actually. And it was because it was the smallest. And he asked me what I thought. I said, there's more talent there than in any department I ever saw, which was amazing. But they were like a boat without a rudder. There was no vision. They didn't really know how to present themselves, but the content was there. So we decided to use it as a model, to create a platform where we take the class out of the classroom. And that had never been done in Finland. And it's actually, if we look at it from a world point of view as a measurement stick, it hasn't been done really anywhere else on this level. Because it can be done for maybe a year or two, but to sustain it for over 25 years, that's something important. And over 140 publications by international publishers, not local. That's more than Sweden, Denmark, and Norway combined as a country. And we're talking about a unit of 60 people. So what we did was we created a multi-tiered platform that focused for the first 5 years on the contextual elements behind the ideas and how best to not only interpret those, but how to visually understand them, but how to also present them. And new methods of curatorialship plays, meaning that we got out of the white box. We started looking internationally as a measuring stick, not locally. So I didn't feel there was any galleries who were on an international level that I wanted to measure myself from. So we took the classes to international art fairs, and we used them more like a reference library. We could see how people presented their ideas. We saw everything from framing to portfolios to how galleries presented the works, but also how they explained them. So what we did is we kind of circled the wagons around a big idea, and we didn't try to do too much too fast. So we're talking about a 20-year program. So the first 5 years that was spent just in teaching them how to build a portfolio and how to use it. The next 5 years was how to actually push it farther. And then the secret is, and I learned this from the Glasgow School of Painting and the Dusseldorf Academy, is that if you press one generation too hard, they'll immediately copy the next one, the one ahead of them. So we had to create a system based upon content always, but how to let the individual develop themselves on their own pace. So to participate in these fairs and to work on this multifaceted level, the problem here is that you have to have, consistency in the quality of your product, which means that I didn't have enough that were ready in the beginning. So what I did was I used the professors. And what I found is if you reignite a professor's career, they fall in love with what they're doing. And they show that in their teaching. So Finns have never been noted for their communicable skills, but also their collaborative skills are a little weak too. So what we were doing is we taught them that, if you take 5 people and you lift a table, it's easier than trying to do it by yourself. So it wasn't just about the contextual elements, it was also about how to, work together, communicate together, share together. And everything that we experienced in the 90s, now I'm talking everything, the entire system has changed today. There is nothing as it was then. So it's very difficult to measure the Helsinki School from a set point because it's been constantly adapting and changing. And because it didn't have a fixed position, it was very difficult to pigeonhole. You couldn't say it's this or it's that. There was no clear definition other than the fact that we did use the photographic process as a conceptual tool. But even that changed. And what I would say now is that 30% of the students who are offered the opportunity, and this is a select group of MA students based upon the contextual creativity of their work, and they're invited in by the other members. It's not like a prison sentence. You don't have to do it or not, but it's an opportunity. That's all. So I would say it's going to be about 30% foreigners, 75% women. It used to be the opposite. What used to be large format color photography has become much more intimate, much more story-like, conceptual, installation-orientated work. So with that said, we have to realize then my job was more or less like an engine. And I just kept it moving and kept innovatively pushing it to another levels to meet the demands of each generation. And those change because the marketplace changes, society changes, the way we conduct the gallery business changes. So for me, it's been a creative process and an evolution. I love this. They use a term, before that term was used, they used to call the internationalization of Finnish photography, which is something that should have been buried in the late 60s. It's non-existent. And anybody who's successful in anything has to have a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. I think I'm not interested in that. I think it's just another type of mouthwash that doesn't mean anything. What it means is to create new platforms for education where we teach how to use the tools. Now, but there's a question before that. We have to introduce to the students the tools that we have available now. Then we have to speculate on what tools will be needed to adjust themselves to the problems they will face in the future. So it's not just enough to sustain a system of thinking in an educational platform as we have today. It's about leading what we will have tomorrow so that we prepare the students. So what we lack in every educational institution that I know of is a core group of visionaries, because there you have to really stand on your merits by what you are. And too many people in the Nordic region, they think by consensus, what others think of them, not what they're actually teaching. And so I think I wouldn't use entrepreneurial whatever as a means for discussion. I would say that we have to prepare our students with the information, the skill sets to be able to use their work in a different manner than than my generation had, for instance. I mean, we didn't even have computers, for God's sakes. So it's totally different. It's a new game. And in 10 years, it'll be another game. So we have to create new patterns of thinking, not just ways of being. And this takes people who have the guts to try things and push on the borders of where we are. That's what we're missing right now. I believe that most successful artists start making works probably 2 or 3 years out of school. It takes time to develop and to think independently on your own. This is just part of the deal. I mean, there is no excuse for plagiarism today. There's no excuse for trying to hold on to an idea and call it your own, because the world is so diversified and so accessible with information. So meaning that it's like ideas are shared and interpreted, and what we have to teach them is that it's okay to share an idea as long as you give credit and learn from what somebody else has done, and why. Ask the question, what makes this good? So what we need to do, the most important thing, what we need to do as educators, but as artists, is we need to measure ourselves from a different system other than our regional requirements, because we don't go anywhere otherwise. And to do so, you have to participate. It's one thing to read about a Biennale. It's another thing to go to one. There's too many fairs, but what you can do is you can learn what are the merits and what are art fairs today. They're crossroads. They're junctions for the publishers, to the collectors, to the museum curators, to how would I say it? It's a circus of characters all coming under the same tent for a duration of a week. They're essential because most of the business is done in the fairs. So how does that differ than doing it in the gallery? Because it's a catch-22. You can't get into the fairs unless you have a gallery. And you use the gallery as it's a staging ground to prepare an artist in how they present their ideas. That's what galleries are used for now. The real selling element, or introducing the actual work itself to the public, is done through different biennales and different fairs. And that's just the way it is. And the people going to galleries is getting smaller and smaller. It's changed. So the skills are learning how to diversify, yet keeping the focus on the contextual part that's really who that artist is and how they think. At the same time, you have to spread the focus so that you can incorporate the whole picture, where before you could just focus on your work and that one exhibition at that one gallery. It's not like that anymore. You have to see the whole picture and where you fit into it. And that can be taught. That's a fact. I mean, no, when you're working in your studio or you're developing an idea, you're not thinking about freedom, and you're not thinking about entrepreneurial success. What you're trying to figure out is the best way to express that idea. And that's the challenge. The challenge is to get that idea pushed from point A to point Z. How to do that? Well, you learn far more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. But you have to give an artist the freedom to make mistakes so that they have the opportunity and the time to search the process for solutions. You see? And in our society, we punish people for making mistakes. If that was true, then why do we have erasers at the ends of our pencils? Because that's part of the process. So I think what I tell my artists is that, you have to find the best possible way to frame the idea, to from presenting it, to creating a book for it, to unfolding it on the internet. But it always comes back, is this, how, what's the real value of this idea, and how unique is it? And if it's a good idea, it might take time, but it will find its way to the surface. So I don't know if you want to call that freedom or entrepreneurial or whatever, but the point is, you have a neck so that you can look from the right to the left. You have to, in this world, you have to keep your head moving and your eyes open so you can see what's going on around you and utilize that experience of what others have already done and utilize their problem-solving solutions into your own equation. That's just common sense. I really, I don't know any artist who's considering, their entrepreneurial skills or the lack of freedom. Most artists complain about the fact they don't have the money to produce the works. That's a fact. They don't have the funding or the space to store the works. And then when they do produce the works and they can't sell them, what do? This is the problem. It usually goes into your mother's basement or your father's attic, and they get ruined. So we have to break that mindset, and it's very important. And this is the key. And I like the fact that we bring up this entrepreneurial, but I'm not using it, and I'm not complaining about it as a bad taste. I think it's good. I think it's healthy. Point is that the Nordic region, and especially Finland, has a time warp factor in their heads culturally. Somehow they think that if you sell a piece of art, it's a negative. It's not a positive. It's okay if you're a conductor and you get paid for your service. It's okay if you're a hockey player and you get paid for a salary for what you do. It's okay if you're a musician. But if you're an artist, somehow they feel it's a cop-out. It compromises the integrity of the work itself. I don't really know where that comes from, but I just think it's ridiculous. And I think it's been around too long and it should be buried. It's not the way the world functions. So my advice is, just because this is unfortunately very true. Just because you're a hero in your own head doesn't make you good. Just because your mother likes it doesn't make it better. The fact is, just because you can sell something doesn't make you successful. What makes successful is how far you can push the parameters of how those ideas expand upon themselves. And that's the secret that has to be taught within the institutions at a grassroots level. And I know artists who've taught themselves, who've just done it on their own. If you take the most famous video artist in this country, Elis Attila, she didn't have a gallery here. She went abroad. Most of the artists, unfortunately, still have to go abroad before they're recognized at home. And this is very Finnish. And this is one of the things that holds us back. So in terms of being innovatively creative, in terms of your free spirit, my advice is to, get the fuck out of this country and see how the rest of the world functions and try to work to that standard, not our regional ones. If you live in a place like Berlin or Brussels, or in a city where the rents are low and the cost of living is cheap, it's easier than living in London or Paris or Helsinki. All right. It also the place is affected by accessibility. Like if you can go see exhibitions and museums, and because you do. That affects you, of course, because you're getting more information. visual information all the time. And can it be taught? Of course it can be taught. Because everything can be taught. But the problem is to find the teachers. Now, the art world it's an animal. It's a mechanism. And it changes all the time. I've already talked a little bit about that. But it changes because the demands change. And the only way to be successful within it is to understand it. And the way to understand it is to get involved. You have to go to art fairs just to see it, because that's where you're going to meet everybody. You have to go to biennales, at least, maybe not on the opening, but you have to go see where and how ideas are developing and see how different curatorial approaches have sort of led the questions that we're leaving around in the world today. It's different. So some are good, some are bad, but even in a bad biennale or a bad fair, you can still learn something. But you need to go in with that spirit, that it's a learning experience. There's no one definition. Okay, so let's discuss what's the problem in Finland or in any Nordic region. First off, we don't have that many galleries who are working on an international level. So how are you supposed to learn? I work with other galleries who exhibit our artists. So we collaborate together to push an artist. And I'm always looking for better galleries than myself, because then the artist has a greater chance for getting the exposure that they're seeking. Okay. Now, in the art business, in the art world, we collaborate and share artists because that makes sense. Because then the artist gets recognized in a grander scale. There's not that much collaboration between artists. I don't see that going on very much. I mean, maybe they share, maybe in a group exhibition they can collaborate together, but in terms of selling art, you usually have a primary gallery, and then you have the satellite ones who the primary gallery is managing that artist to and from. So somebody has to know what's going on all the time. The artist usually doesn't. I mean, their works are all spread out. So we manage, it's not just presenting the works, but you have to also manage it. It's like, you don't just put a plant in a pot and expect it to water itself. So you have to continually prune and take care of these processes for it to function. So in that sense, collaboration on a gallery level is essential. And an artist, a young artist, if they're well spread, 3 galleries, that's enough. Oh, wow, that's a big question. But okay, let's just say networks are creating let's take gallery type persons as an example. Through going in and around and participating with these various fairs, you start to see the same people all the time. So there's a natural network that grows out of your participation, and you start to do better fairs. So the levels go up. The internet is essential. Now, you have to understand how it works. We have auction houses, for instance, that really rely upon the internet to sell their work, in the sense that they take the mobile phone's a good example. If an artist has a work that's on the auction block, for instance, they have a slot. Any collector can Google that artist's name and see what the auction results have been, how much it was offered, whether it sold or not. Now you have to remember that that's usually bad, because the auction prices are lower, and they never tell you. They always tell you if it's not been sold. So it's a gamble. But for a young artist, it's essential to be really well connected from the creating a proper website, which is done in such a way that it also reflects and refers back to their main galleries. All right. For a gallery, it's essential. You have to have that, and I think you're going to see these more personalized video presentations of the artists, different ways of doing it. You have companies like Artsy, which you pay into. I'm not really into that yet, but I probably will be more when the gallery space itself it becomes less essential, then the internet becomes more pivotal in the sense that you actually have to have it because that is your platform. I think that Instagram, as crazy it is very helpful, and you need to post, and the gallery has to be on it all the time. So it's all the time being maintained and processed. In terms of friends, I mean, this is like a business like any other thing, So you have some artists you like more than others. You have some galleries you like more than others. And then you have people you just can't stand. And that's the way it is in any business. And in art is it's no difference. I think what's missing is creating new structures for how we approach the problems that these BA, MA students are going to face. And institutions haven't really addressed that yet. And, we're talking about collaborations. What I didn't emphasize is that I think it's essential that institutions collaborate together and share professors so that ideas become more universal in approaches. And, I'm asked to lecture all the time. I don't do it all the time, but I have choices. But I personally like to go to other places to see how it functions. And what I think we didn't address is that the funding in education in every country has become critical. And it's being cut all the time. So how are we going to meet those needs? So we need to create new systems where we teach through shared experiences. You send your best out, they come back, they bring those experiences with them, and they share them with the department. It's the only way. So we as a country of 5.5 million people, we have to address these issues. Germany's 80 million, so they're on a completely different level. We, from a small country, can adjust and actually control it even better. So I think that what we have to figure out is how are we going to not just address these new platforms, but how are we going to sustain them? And how are we going to build new ones to face the new needs? And this is a question that we have to discuss. That's what I'm going to be talking about for the next 10 years, as long as I breathe. This is a problem that needs to be discussed always.